Good men need to know that who you are as a good man is normal. The behaviors you have as a good man are normal. And the reactions that you have to your wife and how she treats you in the relationship are understandable and reasonable. Hello, I'm Karen Seitz, and this is the Happy Wife School. This podcast is for married women to realize that we are responsible for our happiness, that no one and no thing can make us happy, and that our husbands are not the source of our unhappiness. In each episode, I red pill married women to know that we are the problem in our marriages to good men. For the good men, this podcast will wake you up to the realities of your wife's woman ways, to take back the power you've unknowingly given away to her emasculation in a constructive, caring way. Before we dive into today's episode, a couple reminders. My message is meant for common and usual marital issues. My podcast is not intended for abusive, violent, or compulsive behaviors in a marriage that are threatening or dangerous. Also, please take a second to visit my website and learn more about my courses, which offer solutions for married women and good men. You can find the link in the description below. With all that being said, let's get started. Has your wife diagnosed you as autistic yet? And I put the yet because I see, and why I want to talk about this is I see a trend happening that women diagnosing their husbands as autistic or neurodivergent in some way, or having Asperger's, is looking like this new kind of buzz trend for women, similar to how women like to diagnose their husbands as narcissists. And I get emails from good men, applications from good men interested in my course who share their wife has diagnosed them or thinks that he has autism, or he has Asperger's, or he's somewhere on the spectrum. And so I did a quick search on Google and looked through like Reddit and Quora and was blown away by the posts from wives thinking that their husband is autistic and all the things they're describing. And I want to put it in a different framework to understand the differences between us as men and women and how unlikely it is. So if you're a man listening today, you want to know it's very unlikely. If your wife is trying to tell you that you're autistic or somewhere on the spectrum, it's very unlikely. We're going to talk about why a little later in the show. If you're a woman listening, then I want you to open your heart to see how you're showing up with your husband. If this is you and you're psychoanalyzing your husband and diagnosing him with things like being on the spectrum or even narcissism or other mental or neurological disorders, how damaging that is and what you need to look at in yourself so that you can heal and show up in your marriage in a way where you and your husband can actually come together and have a healthy relationship. So men, here's what you need to know up front about if your wife has diagnosed you or thinks you are autistic or somewhere on the spectrum. You want to know that this is just another way, another tool in the toolbox of emasculation. It's another way for your wife as a woman to avoid herself, avoid looking at her own issues and challenges and how she shows up and her part and role in the issues and problems in relationships. And when she tries to diagnose you, and in this case, with something like autism or Asperger's or being on the spectrum in some way, it's just another way she's trying to make you wrong and bad and point out your behaviors and who you are that she believes are the root of the issues and problems in the marriage. As women, we live in camp victim, blaming others for our own unhappiness and our own issues and problems. And our husbands, as good men, get the brunt of that blame for our unhappiness, and certainly the brunt of the blame for the issues and problems in the relationship. So this is just another way we avoid looking at ourselves and dig into your mental and emotional issues and problems as a way to point the finger out and make you feel that there's something wrong and bad and you or about you. And then as a good man, you're susceptible to believing her, and it emasculates you and weakens you. So again, it's just a way we can divert the blame in the marriage and not have to take accountability for ourselves and look at ourselves. So it's really, really important, and a central principle of what I talk about in these videos for good men is you have to be grounded in knowing yourself as a good man. You have to know what are the qualities, what are the characteristics, who are you when you go to work and you're out and interacting with society and your friends and your family, and can just feel the freedom to be yourself, which good men don't feel the freedom at all to be themselves in the marriage, because we beat that out of good men in the marriage as women. So you need to spend time knowing who are you as a good man, and being very grounded and connected to who you are as a good man, so that you can know when your wife is telling you something about yourself, you can know that's not me. What she's saying isn't me, so that you don't get sucked into the trap and sucked into the manipulation that there is something wrong with you. Like, it doesn't mean a good man doesn't have issues or doesn't make mistakes. But the things that we try to make a good man believe about themselves as our own projection as women are not true. And so a good man's bulletproof to that, ability to be bulletproof to that, is knowing himself as a good man. Last episode, a couple weeks ago, I talked about bullying and how you could see your wife and the emasculation and the manipulation as we're bullies. So if you didn't see that one, go check that one out. And that's just another way that we try to get you off track and make you believe you're something that you're not. Because good men are susceptible. You're very susceptible and vulnerable to being judged and critiqued by your wife. So when she says you have certain issues, and in this case, what we're getting into today, she says you're autistic or somewhere on the spectrum, she'll pull these behaviors that are just normal behaviors or reasonable reactions to how she's treating you in the relationship. And a good man is susceptible to that criticism and to that judgment, because you'll take what your wife is saying and go, well, I do that. She must be right. And it really must be me that's the problem. That's then where you feel constantly made to be wrong. You feel deflated. You lose your sense of being a man, can become a shell of a man, or on the other side, become highly defensive and argumentative in your relationship, which then your wife uses that as ammo, and you can say, oh my gosh, it is me. I'm the problem. Look at how I'm showing up. That's the trap. As women, we set all these traps in the relationship. So when she says you have these issues, and we're going to talk about what are the issues she pinpoints to make you believe that you're autistic or somewhere on the spectrum in just a little bit. But when she says you have these issues and then you believe it and say, I do that, that's the trap that we pull you into to make you believe that we are right, that we're somehow the expert on you, and that we somehow have the knowledge and ability to psychoanalyze you and diagnose you with these mental issues and disorders, and you believe it. That's the trap she sets up for you that makes you feel that you're wrong and she's right. So she manipulates you into believing that normal human behaviors as a man are somehow abnormal, destructive behaviors that are at the root of the issues in the marriage. It's a huge deflection from us having to take accountability and responsibility for ourselves and see how we're showing up and what we are contributing. So good men need to know that who you are as a good man is normal. The behaviors you have as a good man are normal. And the reactions that you have to your wife and how she treats you in the relationship are understandable and reasonable, so that you don't fall into that trap. Where I want to go, if your wife has diagnosed you as autistic, or so you're aware of this, so if it does come up down the road, you go, oh my gosh, this is what Karen was talking about. What I'd like to get into are, and it are 5 ways. So it's like a warning for good men. 5 ways your wife might diagnose you as neurodivergent, because that's the term that is used for people who are on the spectrum, who might have autism or a neurodivergent way of thinking. So I'm going to define that term here in a moment. So before we get into these 5 ways, it's really, really, really important to know that I am only talking about when a woman is married to a good man and she has diagnosed her husband as being autistic or somewhere on the spectrum or neurodivergent, or she's taking you to a therapist or a couples counselor and ask the couples counselor or the therapist analyze you to see if you are on the spectrum. Or you might be going to marriage counseling. This happens in my research. I realized, oh my gosh, this is happening. You're in marriage counseling. The marriage counselor has bought into your wife's story about you and is taking what she is describing and who you are in the relationship. And the marriage counselor might say, I think you might be neurodivergent. Let's do some diagnostic testing to see if you're autistic or on the spectrum. So that's the framework that I am talking about. There are men and women who do have autism or on the spectrum or are neurodivergent and do need to be diagnosed and treated accordingly. So I'm not saying that doesn't happen or isn't true. However, according to the CDC, about 1% of the world's population, 1% of the world's population has a neurodivergence on the autism spectrum. 1% of the world. So for women listening, for the good men listening, statistically, it is nearly impossible that you have autism or are on the spectrum. It is an extremely rare diagnosis. It has just become a buzz trend for that to come up in marriage counseling or for a woman to read Psychology Today. I was guilty. And get these ideas in our head that our husbands have these disorders or a mental issue. So just want to set it up that way. It is very rare, and statistically it's nearly impossible that if your wife is telling you or you're a woman telling your husband that he has autism, it's nearly impossible that is the case. So what does neurodivergent even mean? Neurodivergent means differing in mental or neurological function from what is considered typical or normal. Differing in mental or neurological function from what is considered typical or normal. So the opposite of neurodivergent, the term is neurotypical, which is someone whose mental and neurological functions are considered standard and typical. So why do we get into this confusion between men and women? And why a woman might see her husband as neurodivergent and she's neurotypical, which by far in the research that I did is what's happening in marriage counseling, that I think it's like 4 to 1 a man would be diagnosed to be neurodivergent and the woman is neurotypical, which is fascinating. What this really boils down to is that men and women are wired differently. I know that is a profound new understanding that I just said. We're different. We know this. As men and women, we are wired differently. So how a woman might see a man and his behaviors and how he's showing up, she might see as neurodivergent and different because he is different and wired differently than she is. So how women act and how we show up in our emotional chaos and being emotional beings is neurotypical for us as women, because that's how we are wired. And how good men show up in their behaviors and how they function and how they think, they are neurotypical. It is just that we are different. Another interesting point is you could say the mental dysfunction. that we live in as women is we are the ones who are neurodivergent and not typical in our thinking and our emotional reactions. So it's very opposite, very, very opposite than what our culture and society is thinking, that somehow men are the ones that need to change and they're the ones that are neurodivergent. Is very, very, very opposite. We could learn so much from good men as women, and how to be practical and pragmatic and be in control and handle our emotions. So women will see good men as very different, because good men are predictable, reliable, steady, stable, dependable, and that's neurotypical for a good man. And we will take the simplicity of a good man and his routines and that stableness and say that there's something wrong with him, because we don't understand, because we're not wired that way. Whereas women, we live in inner emotional turmoil and chaos. We live in confusion. We live in our stories. We live in our blame. And that's very neurotypical of women. It's how we are wired. So where I'd like to go with this, like I said, there's 5 ways so good men can know, and also women can just start to understand, hopefully, and see how we're different. There's 5 ways your wife might diagnose you as neurodivergent, and seeing the differences between us as women and good men. And I took this from, I found a Quora post from a licensed counselor, and it was about how your husband might be autistic, and here are the most common signs of autism in a grown man that you might see in your husband. And so I'd like to take these and say, no, these are not a neurodivergence. This is just outlining the difference between good men and women. So number 1 of how your wife might diagnose you as neurodivergent is that you're gullible, that you're easily tricked and manipulated. And this one to me, it was like, hello, the person a good man is most easily tricked and manipulated by is his wife. And the reason for that isn't because you're on the spectrum or you're neurodivergent. It's because as a good man, you don't have it in you to trick and manipulate. So you can't see the games and the manipulation at play. You can't catch it. So you easily fall into the traps when you're being manipulated or tricked by your wife or someone else in your life. And your wife sees that and like, something's wrong with him. Why is he so gullible? And the difference is that as women in general, we are not gullible, because we are manipulative and do trick people. So we can see it and know it. For the men listening, that's why you sometimes think like, God, does she have a sixth sense? How does she know? How does she know? It's because we're not easily tricked and manipulated. And we see it in other women. We can easily see when a woman is being fake with us and she's pretending to be nice, but she's actually, part of my language, being a real bitch. Or when she's being nice to our face, but we know she's talking about us behind our back, or she's lying to us. It's because we can see it, because we have that wiring. Not to say we can't be gullible as women, because we can meet a woman that just blows us out of the water in her ability to manipulate. But in general, we can see it and spot it. The second way, number 2, your wife might diagnose you as neurodivergent, is your routines. And she thinks you are too attached to your routines and have too many routines. And that isn't because you're neurodivergent or autistic or on the spectrum in some way. It's because good men like routine and structure. It's what makes you feel comfort and helps you to feel stable and consistent and emotionally settled. In general, good men are steady and consistent and predictable. It's why as women, we think you're boring. Again, it's just another difference between us, not good or bad or right or wrong, just another difference between us as men and women. As women in general, we like chaos and drama and disruption of routine. That's what makes us feel alive and engaged in life. We abhor structure. As women, we abhor structure and routine because we want to do what we want to do, and we think it's boring to have that routine. Structure holds us accountable, and we don't want accountability. So we want to do what we want to do when we want to do it and thrive on that instability because, again, it makes us feel engaged and alive. Ergo, why we are attracted to bad boys, because they're chaotic and we think that's exciting. And it adds drama and passion to our lives. So again, that's another way, routines. The third way, your wife might diagnose you as autistic or neurodivergent. Number 3, you are unusually honest. Good men are just direct in their communication and they say what they mean. So in actuality, when a woman thinks their husband is being too direct or brutally honest, what's happening is that a good man's actually telling his wife how he's feeling and what his challenge and issue is and what he would like for her to change in the relationship. And as women, we can't handle that. As women, we're evasive and we're pain avoiders and we live in our stories. We are not honest. So that's the difference between us. And we will tell a good man, just be honest with me. How many of you listening in the comments or the chat have your wife said, I just want you to be honest with me. And you are, and then she shreds you a new one. We say we want the truth, but we can't handle the truth. It's like my dad's favorite movie, A Few Good Men. Jack Nicholson, you can't handle the truth. That's us as women. We can't handle the truth. So when men are honest with us and direct with us and just tell it like it is, then we freak out because we see that honesty as hurtful and insensitive to us. Just wired differently. And it would be very wise of us as women to accept that direct honesty from our husbands. My husband will be honest with me and has gotten very strong in himself to do that. And I might have to kind of grit my teeth and zip it. But I've learned to let that in because it helps guide me to where I need to go for myself and helps me to be a better wife and a better person and a better woman. Number 4, it's a big one. Number 4 of how your wife might diagnose you as neurodivergent and being on the autistic spectrum. Number 4 is having an empathy deficit. Having an empathy deficit. When in reality, what's happening in a marriage between a woman and a good man is that he's been emasculated and made to feel wrong and bad. His feelings are constantly dismissed and not taken into consideration. So over time, a natural consequence of being emasculated, of having your feelings dismissed, is that a good man will disconnect and shut down in the relationship. So as women, we perceive that is that they've changed, something about them's changed. They're lacking empathy, when in actuality, we have no capacity for empathy as women with our walls up. In our marriages as women, we live with our walls up, but we're disconnected from ourselves and our walls. And because we blame you for the issues and the challenges and our unhappiness, we have no ability to have empathy to let in how our husbands are feeling or what they might be going through or their issues and problems in their relationship. When in actuality, we're the one creating that environment in the relationship through the emasculation and through pushing our husbands away with our walls up, and then project onto men that they can't identify our pain, can't relate to us, don't notice when we have something troubling us and just ignore us. That is a result of our own behaviors. That again, our behaviors have consequences. You can only shut your husband down. You can only push him away for so long or tell him how he's feeling is wrong so many times and for so many years before he checks out and he feels resentful. Well, my feelings don't matter, so why should I care about hers? He's not doing that to be intentionally hurtful. It's a natural consequence of how he's been treated over the years. So that's number 4, is having an empathy deficit. And the 5th and final way that we're going to cover today of how your wife might diagnose you as neurodivergent or being on the spectrum is that you were very attentive in the beginning of the relationship, and then you stopped being attentive after getting married. This is another really good projection and another consequence of what happens from the emasculation. We project onto men as women that they bait and switched, that you were super attentive in the beginning of the relationship to get the prize and get married. And then you change after getting married, when that is not the case when a woman is married to a good man. What happens of why you feel your husband is not as attentive as he was when you were first dating and before you got married is that we have pushed them away so much and told them over and over and over again, overtly and covertly, that nothing they do is ever enough. It's not right. And so what happens over time is a good man eventually stops trying, and he stops paying attention, and he stops doing the things he used to do because it's never right, it's never enough, or he never gets appreciated for it. What can also happen is, bless good men, they'll keep doing those things and keep being attentive, but it's a projection of as women, we're so checked out in the relationship. We're not attentive at all. And because we don't want to see that and face that within ourselves, we project it onto our husbands. And all we can see are the things that they're not doing, are the things we think they should be doing that they're not. And we focus on the negative, and we miss all the wonderful things and thoughtful things our husband will do for us. It is actually as women that we bait and switch. We're the ones that bait and switch. We have a facade in the beginning of the relationship, and we're not the same woman after getting married. We get the marriage and the guy for our agenda, and then eventually we can't keep the facade up. The facade drops, and everything does change in the relationship. But that's on us from dropping that facade and not being who we were. And then we think that doesn't come with consequences. So those are the 5 ways that your wife might, just in case she hasn't already, or maybe you've experienced this, but 5 ways your wife might diagnose you as neurodivergent. So now I like to get into what's the solution. So I'm going to talk to the ladies first. So women, it's really, really important. And part of the journey I had to take as well is we must accept that men and women are different. Your husband is wired differently than you. He's not going to be your girlfriend. And in fact, the more you try to make him like your girlfriend, the more you try to want him to be like a woman and think and speak and relate to you in the same ways that you operate as a woman, you will be repulsed and disgusted by your husband and see him as weak. When you can understand your husband as a man and see the incredible qualities he has and appreciate his differences, you will want him to be the man that he is, and he will step up to be the man that he is. We have tricked men into thinking we want an effeminate, sensitive man that thinks and acts just like us. A good man by nature is sensitive. But then we train them and groom them to be like us, and then we're repulsed and see them as weak. And they do it because they think that's what we want, because they just want us to be happy. And so they'll do the things we tell them we want, and then you're not attracted to them. They don't feel like a man. They're not being true to themselves, and it ruins the relationship. So step 1 as a woman is you have to accept that men and women really, truly are wired differently. And when you can appreciate your husband for who he is as a man, and you just get to be who you are as a woman, that's where the dance I talk about can happen, the lovely, natural dance that can happen between a woman and a good man when we accept our differences. Then as a woman, you have to move out of camp victim of blaming your husband and focusing on and pulling all the ways you think he's the problem and blaming him. You have to move from camp victim to camp take responsibility, to look at yourself What are you contributing? How are you showing up that's adding to the issues and problems in the relationship? And then you can start to understand yourself as a woman and overcome the destructive behaviors we have as women, our neurodivergence as women, and actually show up in the loveliness of who we are and what we have in us as women. But when we live in camp victim and we have our walls up, we're in the ugly side of who we are as women. And that's what creates the problems and issues in a relationship with a good man. So when you move into camp take responsibility and you look at yourself and understand yourself as a woman and the lovely side you have as a woman, but also the destructive side we have as women, that's where you can understand yourself and begin to show up how you want to show up. And your husband, as a good man, will be right there waiting for you. And then, like I said, you can have that dance. A part of why we pick our husbands apart and want to diagnose them and psychoanalyze them is because we have a total lack of understanding of ourselves. And we don't want to look at our shortcomings and flaws, so we don't overcome them. And then we live in a delusion of who we think we are and how we think we're showing up that isn't grounded in any kind of reality. I often share that my journey has been to understand the destructive side and destructive nature of myself as a woman, not making myself wrong or bad or diagnosing myself with some disorder, just understanding as women, we do have a destructive side. Good men have a destructive side too. It just looks very different than our destructive side. A good man's destructive side is giving away his power to his wife, that she's somehow the expert in the relationship and the expert on him. And that's a destruction to himself and to the marriage as well. As women, our destructive side is our emasculating behaviors and our bitchiness and our walls. It's a very ugly side. When I understood that side of me and do understand that side of me, it's a journey. And that's how I can catch myself and choose to show up the way that I want to. I'll give you a really great example. I shared last weekend, my husband and I were camping for his 50th birthday. And we went to go see a show or a concert where we were. And it's a small little group we love from Florida called the Hip Abduction. They're really cool, like reggae beach music. And my husband was just having a great time, had a couple drinks. And my husband's an introvert, but we love this band. And he just started dancing and he was talking to people and just like, and I know, understanding myself as a woman, one of our woman ways is the fun police. And I could feel it. Oh, I could feel it bubbling up in me. Of like, I want to be like, could you just like, just kind of do this? Like, I could just tone it down. I could feel that in myself because I understand that side of me as a woman. So the best part was I caught myself. I didn't do that. And I said, Karen, you can either be the fun police and have a stick up your butt, or you can join in and have fun and let your hair down. My goodness. And let your husband have a great time and be excited for him. And I got to choose that. When we understand the lovely side of us as women and the destructive side of us as women, we give ourselves a choice. Do I want to be this, or do I want to be fun and nice and let the lovely part of me as a woman come out? And I got to choose that. And what was fascinating is there was another couple in front of us, and they were young. I'd say they were probably in their late 20s. And her husband was so excited and he started jumping up and down. And she yanked his arm and pulled him down and looked at him and said, please stop. And I was like, I don't want to be that tonight. So that's why we need to understand ourselves as women, that destructive side and the lovely side of us, so we give ourselves a choice. It doesn't mean we have to be perfect. It's that we need to understand ourselves and then we can choose. So that's a solution for women. Really, how we get to this part is learning to build a healthy relationship with ourselves. So I'm going to talk to the men for a moment. The solution for you, if your wife is psychoanalyzing you and trying to diagnose you, whether that's with a neurodivergence like autism or anything else, or bipolar or narcissism, here's what you need to know as a good man. You're normal. Your behaviors are normal. Your responses and reactions to your wife's emasculation are understandable and reasonable. So it's incumbent upon you as a good man to know who you are as a good man and to see who you are out in life, at work, and to know that you're perfectly normal. That's incumbent upon you. Because when you're grounded and know that in yourself, you will not give your power away to your wife that then she can make you believe that you've got something wrong with you. That's your vulnerability as a good man. Your wife says you're doing this and this, and you say, oh my God, I do that. And then you think she's right. And then that weakens you. So you have to know who you are and know that you're normal. Doesn't mean you don't make mistakes or have challenges or shortcomings, but that you're normal. So then when your wife is trying to psychoanalyze you and tell you these things and make you think that you're autistic or on the spectrum, you can know, no, I know who I am. Thanks, but no thanks. And don't fall for the trap. Don't fall for the trap. Stop listening to your wife when she psychoanalyzes you. Just, thank you for sharing. I'm good. And stop listening to it. Stop trying to make sense of it because there's no logical sense to it. And that's part of the trap you'll fall into. It's like, where's this coming from? What does she mean? And then that's what gets you caught in that crazy making and the gaslighting to make you think that there's something wrong with you. So one of the best things you can do is, again, see yourself at work, see yourself out in society, and know that you're normal and well-adjusted so that you stop listening to your wife. Don't fall for the trap and don't give your power away to her to psychoanalyze you. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen today. If you haven't, go check me out on YouTube, Rumble, and X. You can find the links in the description below to connect with me there. For those women listening who know you are the problem and want a path forward to take responsibility and change your own inner turmoil and unhappiness, I have a course for women called the Happiness Program, which is the solution to the unhealthy relationship you have with yourself and the issues and challenges you have in your life and your marriage. You can find the link in the description below to apply for a free consultation with me. And for the good men listening who want a solution to take back the power you've unknowingly given away to your wife, I have a course for you too called the Marriage Rescue Course for Good Men Only that teaches you how to rebuild your strength and confidence as a good man so that you can navigate the relationship with your wife in a healthy, constructive way. Again, you can find the link in the description below to apply for a free consultation with me. Thank you again so much for listening, and I look forward to talking with you soon.